Hello everyone, my name is Melinda Martin and I'm the Gallery Director at Linden New Art. Tonight I'm joining you from home despite our best laid plans of joining you from the Linden project space. We're thrilled to be presenting new work by one of our Linden artists in residence, Carolyn Menzies, in her exhibition of Slender Means. Tonight I'm joined by my co-host.
Hello everybody, my name's Juliette Hanson and I'm the curator at Linden New Art. By now, we're sure you've attended a few virtual events from home, but we wanted to make sure everyone feels welcomed and well informed about how this opening is going to proceed tonight. So let's get started with some basics. Mel, can you tell us a little bit more about Linden New Art?
Well, Linden's mission is to support brave new art by mid-career artists and engage visitors through inspiring, thought-provoking exhibitions of their new work. Our Linden project space was developed to provide opportunities for artists living and working in the city of Port Phillip and the south side of Melbourne to exhibit new work. We work in partnership with other organisations to provide exhibition opportunities to artists living and working outside of Victoria as well.
And tonight we're coming to you live on YouTube and Facebook. If you're watching us live tonight and you'd like to make a comment, you'll need to log into the platform you're watching us from. We'd love to hear from you. Simply click on the Say Something or Write a Comment box at the bottom of the live chat area to get started. And if you're watching us through a TV, chatting gets a bit complicated. So we recommend that you, if you'd like to join the chat, go through a computer, tablet or mobile device. That'll be better.
Thanks, Juliette. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all meet virtually this evening. Tonight, I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Greater Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and Juliette and Carolyn are coming to you from the lands of the Yalukit Willam clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and while we meet virtually this evening, tonight draws upon the ancient history of this land and it reflects the millennia of experiences of First Nations people coming together to celebrate, to make art, to learn from each other and to connect. Tonight we extend a very warm welcome to all First Nations people who are joining us here this evening.
As we are virtual this evening and you can't be with us in the Linden project space, we wanted to give you a tour of the exhibition. So please enjoy this short video that takes you around the show.
It's so lovely to see the work in the space, and we thank Carolyn for your patience as we've had to delay the installation and the exhibition and now even like the opening during to the lockdown in Melbourne because of COVID-19. So you've not just had one lockdown, Carolyn, but two, so congratulations. Born in New Zealand, Carolyn studied sculpture at the University of Canterbury School of Fine Arts. A travel grant from Creative New Zealand allowed her to travel to the UK, where she completed her Masters in Fine Arts at the Central St Martin's College of Art and Design in London in 2001. Carolyn has exhibited in solo and group exhibitions in New Zealand, Australia and the UK. In 2019, she was a finalist in the Deakin University Contemporary Small Sculptures Prize, and she was an Australian Tapestry Workshop artist in residence last year, or no, earlier this year in the Australian Tapestry Workshop. Welcome, Carolyn. It's great to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Carolyn, it's so nice to be able to have a chat with you. I'm really looking forward to finding out a little bit more about your work. I've got some questions for you about your practice and the works that are in this show. And if anyone else would like to ask a question along the way or make a comment, please do jump in and do that. Melinda's going to be monitoring the chat, and so Carolyn will be able to respond to your questions live tonight as well. So maybe first of all, I'd like to find out a bit more about what kind of work you started out making as an artist, and then how your practice has developed materially to kind of bring you to this point where you're working with steel and wire predominantly.
Well, I'm one of those artists. I've always made sculpture, so that's sort of the one constant that's run all the way through. I've always been a maker in that way, making three-dimensional objects. But in terms of my materiality, it's a diverse range of materials that I've used at various points in my practice. Things like seaweed, talcum powder, plastic bags, artificial eyelashes. They're all things that are close to home, that somehow have caught my eye at some stage, and I've picked up that material and just really taken it for a walk to see what I could do with it. Where I am at the moment working with steel, that was just something that I literally picked up cleaning, trying to get something particularly stubborn off my studio floor. And instead of scrubbing my floor, I was taking it apart, thinking what a fantastic material the old traditional steel scrubbers were. And really that just started me down this really interesting, looking at this particular type of material, that steel that's in the home, that's under the sink, and just really seeing what kind of journey I could take that on and what kind of forms I could make with it.
Yeah, because the steel and these sort of domestic items do have quite a symbolic resonance for you within your practice. Could you tell us a little bit more about, I guess, the meaning of these materials?
So I'm really interested in the steel. Firstly, because it's sort of the hallmark of modernist sculpture. I think when we think about sculpture historically, we kind of have a vision of someone chipping away at marble, and then very quickly it's a vision of a sculptor welding steel. So I'm really interested in steel kind of having that really strong place in modern sculpture. I'm also interested in steel because if anything, it's kind of the poster child for moving into our modern world. It's very much carries with it these ideas about industrialization, urbanization. And so I was quite interested to look at that legacy of steel in the wider culture and in the arts culture, and see if what you could do in terms of subverting it, because of course I'm taking my steel from under the sink, from in a really different kind of part of social life. And it's a way of kind of gently subverting and playing with some of those stereotypes about steel. It's looking at steel and what we think of as so linked to manufacturing, and actually what happens if we overlay craft techniques with that, and what if we use steel, which is very strong, very hard, but if we use it in a really soft and sensuous and gentle way. So that for me was what really got me honing in on steel.
Yeah, and it does have that place in the home and that relationship to, I suppose, washing up and all this kind of hidden domestic labor that happens in the home. And I can only imagine from seeing your work that they actually take a long time to make with these very small, pockets of steel that you find within the home. How long does it take for you to create each piece? Whilst we're talking about it, I'm going to actually start a video for people to have a look at the works again.
This work is quite labor intensive, but that was fine, because this work that you'll see tonight was all made over lockdown. So it was wonderful to be able to be sort of self-sufficient. It was all work that I was able to use with materials that I could get from the local kind of hardware store or $2 shop. And it's all work that I did make literally by hand. So they are, yes, very time consuming, but they were also, for any of people who are also looking after, have a family home, it was wonderful to have work that I could pick up and put down as well. So, and I did have, as we all did, a lot of time on my hands. But I love kind of using craft methods, but using them with this new material, with unusual materials, I'll say. And so one of the things I love about using a craft technique is you can usually undo it as well. So they are time consuming, but there's also the fact that I often undo things and redo them to get into the space that I'm looking for. So for example, I'm often wrapping, or I've made myself knitting needles, and these little snaky things in front of us now, they were knitted just with homemade knitting needles, like knitting the same way you would knit a sock.
Oh my goodness. I know, because despite the repeated use of these, quite similar materials, each of the works, as people can see in the exhibition, are very different. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about what inspired the different forms that we see within the exhibition, because there's the ones that hang from the ceiling, and then there's ones that are more weighty, or they look more weighty at least, that are floor-based, and then these ones that are kind of extruding from the gallery walls. Maybe you could take us through and talk a bit more about the individual works.
Well, I think as a starting point, I was thinking of this idea of invisible labor and wanting to make something that was kind of a memorial or a marker for this thing because invisible labor, all the work that you do in the home that's never counted, that is gone, and in fact, cleaning, if it's successful, is invisible, is unseen. So it started out with this idea of making monuments, but it's always interesting to see what autobiographical kind of bits come into the work as you're making the work. And what I see in the installation is you've got these first works that are the light, shiny works, and they are definitely more bodily. They're definitely are more based in things you'd find in the home. So they look slightly like chandeliers. There's some sort of bodily figures that are almost like chairs. So you have these kind of references in the material and the references in the forms that are inside the home. And then as you come round, it's almost like you're going outside to things that reference the landscape more. And I can't help thinking that after the kind of inside-outside year that we've all had, whether that is just something that we've all become quite conscious of, this going in and out of the landscape and the home, and not always in ways that we're able to control.
And whilst you're making these forms, do you work very intuitively? It seems like you do, rather than having a clear idea of what the finished work will look like at the end.
Yes, I often have a great idea of how it will look like in the end, and doesn't quite go with me. But that's because one of the things that I love to do is I love to really work with the material. I think there's no, that's where the magic happens, when you actually feel like you're working alongside the material and seeing what it wants to do, and then really getting to know the properties and finding how it behaves the way it wants to the most. For example, with the boulders that I've got, the steel wool lies very flat because it's spun so fine, the wool that I'm using. So it loves to wrap. It wants to wrap on each other, and it wraps in this very dense way. And then because of the color, it sort of absorbs the light. So it's really, yes, I have an idea, and then the material takes on some ideas, and we see where we get.
And I think the charcoal works that we've been seeing as well in here are kind of, they fit into that more experimental side as well, that is materially driven. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you started making those works, because we were talking about whether we would even include them, to be honest, in the show, but they're so resonant of the sculptural forms. They're wonderful. How did you begin using, because they're made from wire wool as well, aren't they?
Well, it's using wire wool. So I made those working from the floor, and it's using charcoal, making charcoal drawings, but how I'm making the actual mark making is applying the charcoal, and then I'm taking it off using the scourers. So I had to buy very good quality paper because, or else I run the danger of actually scouring through it. So yes, those were just, sometimes I don't quite know why I'm doing something. It's just the desire to see exactly what's going to turn out. So as I think I said to you, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about those drawings, but luckily you convinced me to put them up.
I love them. Yeah, they're fantastic. We do have a question that's come in from someone that's here that I maybe we'll go with that now. Thank you, Kenneth. Kenneth's saying the works are amazing, and he loves the whole idea of making craftsy soft pieces out of hard steel. So the question is, how is your work different that you've made within lockdown to being out of lockdown? Do you see a difference between the two?
I definitely have had to work with what I had. And I think too, I wouldn't have made there's this kind of the bolder shapes that's very, very labor intensive. In fact, if people knew how long it took to make those, I might be slightly embarrassed. So I don't think I would have spent as long on some of the works. I wouldn't have made as many pieces. I just had this sort of limited time to kind of really double down on craft and putting the time in. I have to say too, another experience as well as lockdown, my residency in the tapestry workshop was actually really good as well, because that's another group of people that sort of work on a slightly different time zone. They make these incredible tapestries that are often very large and take months, sometimes years. So I loved working there as well, because nobody even questioned that I might spend a whole day doing something that you might only get a tiny little view of. So yeah, that's been a really good experience.
Mommy,
hang on a sec.
I've eaten all
No,
my
Florence.
dinner. Can I please have some?
Yes, go and get what you like. Excuse me, sorry, Carolyn. I'm at home with my little one tonight. The next question that I was going to ask you about, which does tie into what you said about using what you had during lockdown, the title of the exhibition, Of Slender Means. I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that, because it's so evocative, isn't it, of, I guess, making do in a way.
Absolutely. And that's really where the idea came from because of making do and having to do more with less. But it is also a shortened, I've borrowed it from Muriel Sparks, her book, The Girls of Slender Means, which she wrote. It's set in post-war England, and it's a fantastic book. And one of the things about making sculpture is you've always got to keep looking at things in the round, and it is great and terrible, because often when I'm halfway through making something, I'm like, it looks great almost every side. And I think, as well as wanting things to physically look great from every angle, and I also want, as you look at the work, I'd like you to kind of be able to create meaning from different angles. So the idea of overlaying this novel onto the work was actually really great for getting the show together. So, for example, you can see the red bollards that are in one of the works, and you might have noticed that a number of the titles of the works are actually, they come from London tube stations, because Muriel Sparks' book is based in London. And when I found these red bollards and they were London letterbox red, I was like, oh, it's all coming together. And one of the things I would really recommend, this very small novel, it's fantastic, but it's a story. Girls of Slender Means are women who are not very wealthy, and they are living in a boarding house. And it's after the Second World War, and just after, in fact. And within the boarding house, the rules are very strict and social etiquette is high. And then there is this window, very small window, and that the novel pivots about, and they're able to get onto the roof. And of course, what the girls are able to do on the roof is very different rules to what is in the house. So I also think it's a lovely book in terms of thinking about moving between interior and exterior and different modes of being and different rules. So it was a lot of fun to actually try and weave in the references to that book in this. And for example, the London plane trees, which are such a part of the Melbourne streetscape, and in fact, this branch comes directly from outside the Linden. That was a lovely another reference to bring back. So what I'm hoping is that when people come and look at the work, yes, there's lots of stuff about the domestic and household labor, but I'm also trying to create sort of references you could read it as references to the book, references to inside and outside.
It's wonderful how this show has developed through quite a trying time, and I suppose the next I wanted to ask you about your work as an artist more generally, because it can be a struggle to keep going and to forge a career as an artist. So I wanted to know if you always saw yourself being an artist, and maybe in order to keep going, what's some of the best advice you've had along the way?
So I think, to start with, I didn't think of being an artist at all. I think I didn't know any artists, and in fact, I don't know if I'm motivated to be an artist. I think what I'm motivated to do is make work, to make things, and I think lots of people are actually motivated to make things, and it's definitely one of those things. I find the only thing worse than making art is not making art. So, and in terms of advice, my advice I give others is normally don't do what I do. I think the best advice for artists and anyone is measure twice and cut once. But I definitely do. I think I try and avoid cutting because of the fact I work so intuitively. So I'm always trying to do things and not cut them, and to just try things out. So I suppose just that spirit of playfulness and experimentation, which I'm sure a lot of people have given me that advice to do. But that definitely is something that I like to live by in the studio.
I think that the spirit of playfulness and experimentation really does come through in the work. And I'm noticing again, I remember we talked about during install about the weights that are included in some of the works and actually what they're called and how that ties in. Can you remind me of that? Because it was quite lovely.
Yes. So I remember you asking about them, and I was slightly embarrassed because I said, well, it's because I can't avoid it. I said, well, it is because I love putting something very floating, very light, and then weighing it down to kind of pulling those things against each other. But I said what it really is they're called sinkers, and I couldn't resist putting sinkers in with materials that come from under the sink.
Perfect. It's so good. Thank you for reminding me of that. The last question I have, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in from people watching, but I was really keen to know what you have coming up next.
Well, at the moment, I'm trying not to hold anything too tightly, as that seems the good strategy. But I have Knox Immersive is coming up for me in November. That's where the City of Knox does this really great art kind of 2-week festival. It's the 13th to the 28th November. And so I am installing some work there's a grand old homestead called the Miller Homestead. So I've got a very beautiful old Victorian veranda. So I'm going to be installing work there. I also, earlier this year, I organised an Albert Park art walk, which was supposed to be a one-off, but I'm rather hoping that I get to do it again. And then, so they're the tangible things I've got coming up. Intangibly, I'm actually very keen to work more with other people. This year has made me have to be quite self-sufficient, but I'm really looking at ways of working with others. I've really missed other artists, other people in the art world. So that's what I'm trying to open up my art world a little bit in the upcoming months.
Thank you. That sounds fantastic. We do have another question that's come in. Thank you, Kathy. Kathy's wanting to know, could you tell her a little bit more about the fine knitted pieces? She's asking about, do you use knitting needles or finger knitting or another method?
So some of the very fine I've used working with Dal using what's called Viking knitting. So just using quite fine gauge wire, and then using the Viking knitting, and then just using metal to kind of make it smaller. I just about use anything to knit with. So I've knitted using my own arms, but I find that gets very dirty. So now my favorite is plastic pipes make excellent knitting needles. So, but just about anything makes great knitting needles.
Yes, they would be so nice and slippy to move things. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn, for taking the time to chat with us. If people would like to find out more about Carolyn's work, then you can visit her website. I think we're going to bring that up on the screen again soon. Really appreciate your time, Carolyn, to let us know more about the show, and can't wait for people to come and have a look at it.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. It's so great to be listening to hearing about your work. I'm just ashamed that it's not in the gallery space, but best laid plans. It's a really great exhibition. We hope that we'll be opening the gallery hopefully on Friday, so we're going to keep everything crossed that is that is the case. Tonight, I'd like to gratefully acknowledge the City of Port Phillip as the owner of our beautiful home and generous supporter of our public programs, our education opportunities and our exhibitions. We're also grateful for the support we receive from Creative Victoria's organisational investment program, Business Victoria and Vic Health. Many people have worked behind the scenes to develop and further invest in the artists and the exhibitions you see on display. Tonight, I'd like to thank our philanthropic supporters, the Helen McPherson Smith Trust, Robert Seltzer Foundation, Community Enterprise Fund through Elwood Community Bank, the Telstra Foundation, our education partners, the University of Melbourne and Melbourne Business School, and our corporate supporters, Matzo's, Minter Allison, Punt Road, Stone and Wood, and Zilla and Book.
And now it's my turn to talk about money. This is the bit where we ask you to support us if you're able to do so. We're offering this event online for free tonight, so everyone can enjoy it, but it does take a lot for our small team to produce this virtual event. So if you can, please think about supporting us. We'd suggest a figure of $15 or $20 per person if you can. And of course, if you'd like to add more zeros to the end of those numbers, we won't say no at all. The link to donate securely online is at the bottom of your screen now, and we'll place the link in the chat as well. We need your support now more than ever, and we thank you in advance for your generosity.
Thanks so much, Juliet. As always, we do like to hustle every now and then because that's something we need to do as a contemporary gallery. We look forward to welcoming you back to the gallery and to visit Carolyn's exhibitions. Hopefully it won't be too much longer until everyone can be back in the gallery space. The Linden Projects Gallery is open to the public from Wednesday to a Sunday till 11 till 4. You'll need to check in with the Service Vic app. We're pretty good at doing that around Melbourne at the moment, but you know, those incognito mystery gallery visits, well, they're off the table at the moment. We need to capture those details for contact tracing purposes. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight in this virtual streaming land. It's lovely to have you with us. Thank you to the lovely team at Linden who make it all possible. Our curator and my co-host this evening, Juliet Hanson, our development manager, Lynn Johnson, our design and marketing coordinator, Mathieu Vendivoux, our events and a community engagement coordinator, Linda Studena, our gallery administrators, Chloe Hazelwood and Hannah Vasek, our volunteer officer, Ada Coxell, and of course, Ana Garcia Solana for her assistance with the installation. Thank you for joining me in co-hosting this evening, Juliet.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you everybody for joining us, and our team looks forward to welcoming you into the gallery. Good night and have a lovely evening.